Hello and welcome to another episode of the CPMC podcast. I am MC, as always, joined by CP. Chris, what's going on tonight?
Not a whole lot, man. I'm just getting excited. It's starting to be draft season again. I mean, I know we never stopped, but for the mainstream, it's starting to be draft season. And I texted you this last night. The high stakes guys that I follow and sort of trust their player evaluations, because they've got the most money on the line. They're drafting Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey in their top two, top three. This season if they want to go running back. As some guys are going with the wide receivers, Jefferson or Chase, but the amount of times we've gotten both McCaffrey and Barkley at extreme values this offseason, to see that, where the high stakes guys are taking them, I am jacked up, man, jacked up.
Yeah, you and me both, man. We were able to last year, that was the big key for us was getting insane value on Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. And I wonder who that guy is. Who are you going to say a guy that's dropping in drafts, Chris, that has a potential to reemerge as a potential the RB1 or the wide receiver one, top three anyway at their position come next draft in 2024.
Oh, geez. Come next draft, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking for the guy later down, further down this year, that's going to produce, and I think the guy that's falling that could, produce a ton this year is Austin Eckler. I mean, he's older. He keeps slipping in drafts, and I could see that guy, maybe not in 2024, obviously, but I think he's got one more really, really top end year in him this year.
Yeah, I could see that. You
I'm
know,
avoiding your question entirely because I don't think that player exists, to be honest with you.
I mean,
I just,
I asked it because I do have somebody in mind, Chris, and I think it's Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he's not slipping to the way Christian McCaffrey did last year, if I remember correctly. But Jonathan Taylor is a guy that you can easily wait until the start of the third round to get in superflex drafts right now. I think we're going to see him going in the top 15 when it's this time next year. So I've been racking up, and actually Najee Harris, Chris. This may be a hot one that we may want to erase this tape, in 2024. But I'm going to say Najee Harris, if I'm going with the dark horse, is a guy that we could see jump back into like the second round next year. But he's a fourth, fifth rounder right now.
yeah, I mean, and I think we've even got him later than that in some. So yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, he's a bit of a gamble. That offense isn't great, but if you're gonna pick a name, that's not a bad one.
All right, let's get to the super friend league here, Chris. It's a 12 teamer, half PPR. We're starting, I think it was eight, and we got one quarterback as well, Chris. Um, this one was an interesting one, Chris, when it doesn't play that deep, you have to look at this thing with a fine-tooth comb, really pour through it here to figure out who the top teams are. And I think this league is basically split in half. I love the top four, and then 5 through 12 I think are out. So I would say like contender and pretender in this league here. 1 through 4 is very good. The team that I had ranked fifth, when I first saw it, I originally wrote down ninth, not knowing what any of the other teams looked like. So I wrote him down as ninth, and that's how bad some of the back teams are. It bumped him up to fifth. So let's take a look, Chris, at these teams right now. We're going to start at 12, work our way up to 7 in the first show, take a little break, and then work 6 through 1 for our part two. So let's get to number 12, Chris. We got the Lurchinators. Lurchinators here at number 12. We've got a team of Joe Burrow, Zach Moss, Cordero Patterson, Michael Gallup, Brandon Cooks, Mark Andrews, Kendrick Bourne, and Khalil Herbert. Not everyone's got their lineup set, Chris. So we're going to be throwing some guys in here, but this team is pretty close to having his lineup set, which is not great here, Bob. There's literally nothing on the bench here that I want to mention. Taxi Squad has still nothing. He's got no first this year, Chris. This is, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, among the worst teams situations I have ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sugar, there's no sugarcoating it. Okay, Um, and as I'm looking at this, I'm trying to figure out how we can squeeze out value, how we can get back picks and a lot of them and get two players back. I mean, I don't know if there's a market for Joe Burrow in a one QB league. I'm sure there is. If those top four teams do need that elite QB, because I think Burrow's, easily in the top four, top five QBs. So, I mean, he could be an upgrade for one of those guys up there. We don't really have a whole lot of anything here at these position spots except for tight end. Considering there's really only like one good tight end, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews is probably, in the top three or four. Maybe there's a spot for him in those top four teams. So those would be the two guys I've got to look to get rid of. I mean, this team, the only way this team turns it around is to just get as many picks as possible, turn them into multiple pieces. We've got to figure out I mean, if you can get thirds for some of these guys, I would do it. Do not give away your first by any means ever for the next 3 years. This is a 3 year, potentially 5 year project, I would say. And you need to squeeze out every bit of value. You need to pick up the hot guy on waivers and flip him for 2 seconds. You need to flip guys for thirds and just hope you start hitting on these lottery tickets. It's the only way this thing turns around in any sort of reasonable amount of time. But I think he's just stuck right now. And there's really no other way to say it. But this guy needs to squeeze out every single bit of value on his roster that he can and just stockpile lottery tickets basically, and hope to get enough to cash him in.
Yeah, that's all, right? I mean, it's going to take, one step at a time to get this thing done. Capitalize on everything that you can. Like you said, I apologize for my abrasiveness after seeing this team. And again, have some fun rebuilding this thing. Make it, it's going to be a while, right? You're not going to be looking at a 24, 25 turnaround on this team. So take your time with this thing. Try to do it right. Start to amass picks in the future. Know you can get it done. Just be smart with it, right? And just have, like you said, lottery tickets, right? Draft those young guys, see what they turn into, and hope that it's something. But yeah, this thing's not going to turn around immediately, Chris. Let's see if we take a step forward here with number 11, where we've got Big Beast at number 11, Chris. Big Beast. Where are you, Beast? There you are here. We've got Huntley currently at quarterback. He's got Lamar Jackson on the bench, obviously. Singletary, Gainwell, Julio Jones, Devontae Smith, Tyler Higbee, Josh Kelly, and A.J. Brown. Guys on the bench, Kenny Pickett, Lamar Jackson, like I said, Elijah Mitchell. Chuba Hubbard may be worth a mention. He's an interesting piece. A lot of people have been targeting him as kind of a late round lottery ticket, if you will. Chris Olave going to find his way into the starting lineup here as well. Breece Hall, Rashad Bateman, got to mention him before I anger you. And he's got 106 in this draft coming up. So we've taken a significant step forward here, Chris. But again, when I'm looking at these teams these leagues that don't play very deep, you really got to pour through it and see what's going on. And there's just some holes, and there shouldn't be holes in a team in a league that only starts 96 total players. So there's a few too many holes for me to have this team anywhere near the playoffs, but a significant amount of greater pieces than what we just saw.
Yeah, and I think the good thing here is that this team is pretty young, right? I mean, it's very young with Lamar, with Breece Hall, with Olave, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. But you're right. I mean, there's a couple holes here. Tight ends, not a great spot. That this last flex spot isn't great. RB2 isn't great. So we're gonna look to kind of improve those. And I think it's just a slow build with this team. You've got that 106. I think that's going to be a quality player. I think still, we're probably looking at maybe in a one QB league, it's probably Jordan Addison, maybe there are 106, or Quentin Johnston. I think, either of those guys, I think slots nicely on this team. And then you've got your first next year. So I think it's just kind of a slow build with this team. It's young enough. I think we can afford to wait. I think the one move I would make here, Matt, is I would look to get off AJ Brown. I think you can get quite a bit for him right now, especially from those teams, that are looking, that have multiple assets and are looking to consolidate. Because again, it's another team where I want multiple pieces. And given that I've already got Devontae Smith, and I'm, I don't want both Philly wide receivers here. I'd look to get off AJ Brown and get, 2 to 3 really quality pieces, 2 to 3 first worth of value for AJ Brown, I think is more than fair in this league. And I'd look to do that. I think that's something that could really kind of set this team on the right path, going forward. Because I think this team, next year with 1 to 2 moves plus his pick next year, I think could be in pretty good shape. It just seems like a team on the rise to me as opposed to a team, falling down.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. I wonder if trading Lamar Jackson's in the cards again with only one quarterback. I know they're not going to carry as much value as usual. But I'm wondering, Chris, is 106 more likely to be a quarterback in this format, in the rookie draft? Because I got to believe it goes, and it's half PPR. So I wonder if it goes something like, Bijan Robinson, then Jahmyr Gibbs. And then I think it probably in this league gets a little bit hairy for those next, I don't know, 6 picks or so between the 3 wide receivers that a lot of people like and the three, um, and the 3 quarterbacks that are there. So I don't know how that could fall. So man, it'd be real nice if you can get Lamar, give up Lamar Jackson, get a decent amount back, and then go ahead and draft your quarterback at 106. Because I gotta believe there's going to be one there.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, I just looked it up here, and the ADP for one QB leagues, Matt, is Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, JSN, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, and then Zay Flowers comes in at number 6. So I think you're gonna be gauging kind of what you can get for Lamar Jackson. And if it's a decent piece, I would do that. And then I get either one of the top 5 guys, or that quarterback. I mean, the quarterbacks are going to be there. In one QB leagues, I mean, Bryce Young goes in the second round. CJ Stroud goes in the second round. So, the value is just not there for those guys. So, if I can get a good amount for Lamar Jackson, I do it. And then I draft, I'm happy to draft, Anthony Richardson if he's there at 6. And if not, okay, well, I've still got, one of those top 5 position players. So, yeah, I think it's a decent idea if you can get it. You just kind of have to weigh the options and see what's available to you.
All right, Chris, time to move on to our number 10 team here. Our number 10, we've got Sailor Girl here at number 10. Sailor Girl at 10. We've got Justin Fields, James Cook, Jamal Williams. We got Carter, Robinson, Goddard, Robinson and Carter obviously won't be there. Hopefully, when this thing gets kicked off. We've got Dallas Goddard, who I like, Aaron Jones, and Michael Pittman. On the bench, we've got Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love as potential inputs. We've got DeAndre Swift and Isaiah Pacheco going to take over at the running back position. We've got Michael Thomas likely to suit up at wide receiver for this team. Nothing on IR or taxi. Has the 101 this year, Chris, which is gigantic. Now, I've got this team very similar to the one that we just saw. But I've got this just a notch ahead. I kind of like the upside play here a little bit better. Man, I wish there was a little bit more at wide receiver, but listen, it's a half PPR league. We've got a stud quarterback. We're about to bring on a stud running back. Love throwing Swift into this lineup as well. See if James Cook can take a step forward. I like this team here, Chris. I like the makeup of it for it not being overly talented this year.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. It's pretty reasonably built. Pretty solid. Yeah, I'm wondering if given that this team's probably not going to compete this year, certainly not going to compete for a title with those top 4 teams. Is there is there a wide receiver in the Aaron Jones range that fits this build that's young enough? I'm trying to think of the guy, and I'm not sure who the heck it is. Because I mean, Aaron Jones is going in that he's going in that Mike Evans, Keenan Allen range in terms of wide receivers, but I don't want either of those guys with this team. Do you think you could get a George Pickens or I'm trying to
Yeah,
think of who
those were the names that came to my mind. I think you could do a little bit better than George Pickens at the wide receiver position only because it's half PPR.
right?
I don't know if you're getting into the Chris Olave range. I think that was the
No.
first name that popped into my mind. But again, remember it's half PPR, so I think it's closer than it sounds. in this league, but I agree. I don't think you're getting there. Um,
Jerry Judy?
okay, that's a name
That's
I could
not
sink
bad.
my teeth into. Okay, that's a good one.
That's not bad. I think that, and I think that fits. Somebody like that is the point, basically. That's what I would look to do here because I've got Swift, and I'm gonna bring on Bijan Robinson, and I've got major holes here at these two wide receiver spots. I can put in Michael Thomas maybe, but that's really it. So that'd be the move I'd make with this team. I think it's very simple. Just kind of trade, the older Aaron Jones in terms of running back years, especially for a younger kind of upside play at wide receiver. Draft at 101 and see what you get at 206 and 212, and kind of go on building this thing out.
Yeah, I might even consider moving on from 101 here, Chris. If we're looking to add some things. I think it's got enough good guys on this team where you don't necessarily have to liquidate a solid piece like that. I'd like to see what happens once we do get a Bijan Robinson in here and see what DeAndre Swift is going to be made of in Philadelphia. Because I think the cards are there for it to be kind of sneaky good. I think it's still lacking a piece or two because it's just kind of missing that top end talent, right? After Bijan Robinson and Justin Fields, I don't know. DeAndre Swift is a guy that people are still kind of hemming and hawing on, not really sure what they feel about him. I like him, as we know very well. But I think that's where I stand with this team, Chris. Just not enough top end talent to really see him in the top, even 6 or 7.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, and that's kind of why I advocate going after the wide receiver here. For a guy like Aaron Jones, and then the same thing goes as well for DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift plays really well in Philadelphia, and this team is not winning and is clearly not going to be a title contender. I think you flip DeAndre Swift as well for a younger piece. Trade that production for years with one of the top teams who I'm sure could use a guy like DeAndre Swift is if he reaches his ceiling in Philadelphia.
All right, Chris, moving on to number 9, and we've got trust in Russ. I can't think of a worse idea than to trust in Russ, but alas, we have it here. We got Russ Wilson, Al Jair, Miles Sanders, Peoples Jones, and Jacoby Myers, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Lockett, Drake London. Guys on the bench that are worth a mention. Not a whole lot here. We've got Kadarius Toney. Nothing else really there. He's got pick 103 and 110 in this draft, which is one of the reasons I bumped him up. I think this is one that's kind of on par with what we just saw. I may even like the last team that we saw a touch better. It's close. I was hemming and hawing between these two. Ended up going with Trust in Russ for the reason that we might have just a little bit more here as we add a couple of picks. But same tier here for 9 and 10. It's just not overly strong here, Chris. And we're going to add a couple of rookies in this year's draft, but it's not overly deep. There's no top end talent at all. It's going to come down to what happens in this draft, I think.
Yeah, man. Sidebar here on Tyquan Thornton for New England. I'm down here in the South. I don't get the local New England you know beat writers, but he was making a little bit of national news here of how much the Patriots were talking him up and how great he had been. I know it's June. I get it. But he's a fairly talented player. I think, for teams that are in the bottom of our rankings, I think having guys like Tyquan Thornton, like Kadarius Toney, those guys that if things break right for them, all of a sudden they just bring a ton more roster value for their price, right? So you get these guys, Kadarius Toney, Tyquan Thornton. They're super cheap, right? You don't have to pay much to get them. Those are the kind of shots that teams at the bottom should be taking now all the time. You got to have 4 or 5 guys like that on your roster because if they hit, you can cash in, whether it's on picks, whether it's on, more proven players. They're just great guys to have on the roster. So I like having those two on this team. They may not give you the production, but if they do, boy, you're looking to cash in and make some profit on those guys. So I like that. In terms of the team itself, yeah, I mean, there's just not a whole lot here until we see the picks, right? I think 103 and 110, I think that they help quite a bit. I like Drake London here. I like Miles Sanders as well. So there's a few pieces here that look good. But the picks, I think, the picks, I think, are where this team's going to make its money. If one of those two wide receivers hits, if any of these bench wide receivers hit, I think you turn a profit there. But not enough here for this team to compete for a playoff spot for sure.
Yeah, definitely lacking there. Chris, as a New Englander, I can say that Tyquan Thornton buzz skipped right over the northern states and I guess landed in Florida because I did not hear that. I don't know if anybody up here in New England is buying that story, but yeah, I mean, if that could happen, it'd be a real nice thing. Chris, with this team here, I think we've just got to continue with the rebuild, see what we can get for Tyler Lockett. I'd send Miles Sanders on his way, Russ Wilson. I think this is the first one where I could say, let's just tear this thing entirely apart, get what you can, and really just start rebuilding because I think it's far away. And there's some pieces here that are worth building around with those picks. So I think if we just kind of tear this thing down to the studs, I think that's probably the best course of action for a team like this. Let's see who's right ahead of Trust and Russ, Chris. We've got Stewie at number 8. We've got Stewie at number 8. Looking at a roster of Mac Jones, he's got Wilson and Carter at running back. That's obviously not going to be it. Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Taysom Hill, Deontay Johnson, and Odell Beckham. Guys on the bench. Sam Howell could see a starting role this year. What else do we have down here? Marquez Valdez, Scantling, Robert Woods. Not a whole lot else. Mike Gesicki, maybe. Taxi Squad's got John Mechie, Jameson Williams, Desmond Ritter. He's got pick 2, 11, 12, 201, and 211 this year, Chris. So this is another team that I think looks a little incomplete as it sits right now. But I think, and this is kind of the headspace that I was in, and I'm going to put this team on a similar tier that we just saw. This team's incomplete. I got to see a little bit more after the draft. And I think when it's all said and done, we see a complete team. We're looking at this team as right where I've got them.
It's hard not to like the building blocks here, right? There's nothing at running back except for 102. But Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Deontay Johnson, I mean, that gives you a very long runway to kind of make this thing work and figure it out. And you've got Jameson Williams as well. It's unfortunate the suspension there. We won't see what we have in him, until midway through the season. But with 102, you add a quality player. 111, 112, 201, those should all be quality players as well. And I think you add your QB of the future there. If not two QBs, I think I would not hesitate to take both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud with two of those three picks. Just kind of give myself two bites of the apple, add a potential elite QB, and then I'll grab the best position player available as well. And then in the back end at 211 and 302, I can further fill out my flyer position players. So I like the way it's trending. Again, I mean, we've got a long runway to make this work with the wide receivers and the picks he has. So, it's incomplete, but I like the direction it's heading. If the rookies pan out, this team could be a little frisky, but certainly not a playoff team. And in that same tier that you had the two prior teams.
Chris, with this team, are you taking Jahmyr Gibbs or your first or quarterback here?
I'm definitely not taking a quarterback at 102. No chance. I'm gonna take Gibbs. I'm gonna take Gibbs. For me, it would be between Gibbs or JSN, and I feel good about my wide receivers. And I think I have a better shot at getting a wide receiver at the back end of the first, than a running back at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that's sound. But man, I think this team could really use that upside quarterback. I mean, we know what we're getting with Mac Jones. It's not great. I think we probably know what we're getting with Sam Howell. That's definitely not great. And he had somebody else down here, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Desmond Ritter. Maybe that's your high upside play to see what happens with it as well. So Yeah, I think this is, it'd be nice when Jameson Williams comes back from his suspension, see what John Mechie's going to be out there in Houston, who I really, really like. Great story as well. So again, frisky team here, but man, nothing that's really got these playoff teams worried about taking a spot. All right, last team for the show here, Chris, before we move on to part two. We got Nightmares on Al Street here. Nightmares, we've seen this guy a couple times already in these leagues. He finished in second place apparently last year, Chris, as he's in draft position 11. We've got Dak Prescott, Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, George Pickens, Chris Godwin, Darren Waller, Ramondre Stevenson, and currently Latavius Murray. He's got Derek Carr sitting on the bench, Aaron Rodgers as well. Isaiah McKenzie may be worth a mention now that he's in Indy. Hunter Renfro. Calvin Ridley's a guy that I could slot into the starting lineup. Juwan Johnson as well. He's got Cooper Kupp sitting here on injured reserve, which is going to play a major role for him this year. Picks, he's got pick 202 that's going to be anything worthy of a mention this year. I think we're moving in a certain direction here, Chris, with this team. I think it's a little bit better. It's a little bit more proven. This is where we start to see that getting into the playoff mix. But am I scared of this team? Not really.
Yeah, I mean, you throw Cooper Cup here, in that last flex spot for Latavius Murray, it certainly looks a lot better. But I'm with you. Calvin Ridley can get in this lineup too. But I'm with you. I think this looks like a quality team. Probably a fairly consistent team, but with how shallow the league is, I'm with you. There's just not enough. There's not enough of the just game breaking players. You have Cooper Cup, and honestly, that's probably it. Maybe Josh Jacobs puts together another season like he did last season. But it's kind of hard to bank on that. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree here. It's not, it's solid, but unspectacular is kind of what I would say. So this team's going to be really interesting, week 4, week 5, week 6, and seeing where it sits. If he's to me, if he's 3-3 or worse, it's a sell. I mean, you can't be middling, with teams like this. Now, granted, this team finished second place last year, which is crazy to me with the Cooper Cup injuries, that he did, but and how bad Dak was as well. So I wonder if there were some trades that went down. But this team, I think, is going to be kind of maybe a seller. Um, come mid-season. I could very much see that playing out.
Yeah, that could definitely happen with this team. We're about to miss the sell window on a few of these guys. Yeah, but you mentioned that second place finish last year. So, definitely can't count this team out, especially when he adds Cooper Cup back to the mix. We'll see what comes of 202. Yeah, I think this team is fine, Chris, but I just need I think Cooper Cup will get back to that elite status. But other than that, we've just got a team that looks like it's drafted in like the 4th round of a startup. It's okay, but it's nothing that scares me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a consistently reasonably well scoring team. But I have a hard time seeing this team, cracking the upper echelon of points scored. And I don't think he's got, those game breaking weeks in him, for the most part. So, you could maybe try to consolidate a little bit, if you can pry a stud away, but I think it's going to be really difficult to do. Unfortunately, it's just so hard to get those guys in a shallow league like this. So, um, you know, it's a tough spot for this team. I think it's just going to be one of those times where, I can't really advise them to buy or sell right now. I think you just kind of have to wait and see and play the season out and kind of adjust on the fly as it goes.
All right, that's going to do it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 in just a few moments. While you're waiting, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you in just a little bit.